It's not 5 o'clock, and they don't care. Welcome to Wine to 5. Entertainment, education, and everyday drinking for everyday people. Your hosts are Valerie Caruso and Stephanie Davis, two wine educators who don't need a clock to know when to pour that next glass.
Today we're talking with Kevin Begos. He is the author of the new book, Tasting the Past, the Science and Flavor, and the Search for the Origins of Wine. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thank you for having me on.
And Kevin is a former MIT Knight Science Journalism Fellow and former Associated Press correspondent whose work has been published in Guildsom and many newspapers and magazines. And I think, Kevin, didn't you just wrap up a big book tour?
Yes, I was on the West Coast for a week and around New York for a week, and then also the Atlanta area and the Orlando area.
Wow, congratulations.
And now back home? Yeah, congratulations. That's a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Now I am back home. One more event around Labor Day, but and then some more in the fall. But for now, I have a little rest.
Of course, we thoroughly enjoyed this book and cannot wait to get into it. But we also would like to get to know you a little bit better. I mean, we got a lot of we did stalk you on your website, saw some of your past projects and what you've done. But is there anything else you want to add to your backstory real quick that we did not include in your bio or that we did not mention already?
You might just mention that, for years I was a very, I think, normal, average wine drinker. I was a little intimidated by kind of everything. I really enjoyed wine, but couldn't really figure out how to get serious about it, and was a little overwhelmed by details. And probably for most of my life, I just assumed that the French invented winemaking. I'd never really thought about it that much. But if you had asked me 20 years ago that question, I probably would have said France.
Well, being Italian, I would have said the Italians created winemaking because my grandfather used to make it. But when you start studying wine, it is true that they refer to France as the mothership calling you home. But I think many people who've studied wine have learned since then that the origins are not where we all thought they were.
Yeah, about 5,000 years earlier,
right?
About a few thousand miles to the east.
Just 5,000.
Right.
Well, so how would you summarize how you've changed since writing this book?
Well, I feel like I've finally started to understand wine. Of course, I'm still have so many things to learn, but just by trying so many different varieties and, trying the Qvevri wines and amphora wines from different makers, it kind of opened up my mind to all sorts of possibilities and, just made me look at wine grapes and different varieties in a whole different way. I no longer, go looking just for Chardonnay or Merlot or Shiraz or things like that.
It sounds like, Steph, that Kevin has become kind of like us. I don't know about you, but I walk into my wine shop and I say, "Hey, Dirk, what's new and weird?"
Yes.
Yeah, the weirder, the better. I mean, Val and I are all about obscure grapes, and that's why we loved your book so much. And, just coming across the words of grapes that I've never heard of before, it gets me so giddy.
And really this book might not have ever happened, it wouldn't have ever happened if I hadn't have tried the Cremation wine 10 years ago. But also when I learned soon afterwards that they were using these Hamdani and Gelati and Balati and Tabuki grapes, just the first time I heard those words, I was like, what? That
totally.
Was so different than anything I'd ever heard about from wine. So that really inspired my whole journey.
And for the listeners who haven't read the book, you have to understand that this whole thing started in a Jordan hotel room at the hotel minibar. So I don't know how many people can say that a hotel minibar changed my life for the next decade, but that's pretty much where this book takes off. So, because you were a reporter in Jordan, you were reporting on Middle East social topics, correct?
Yeah, medical and social topics. So it had nothing to do with wine, and it was actually just a tiny minibar in my own room, in the room itself. And I would normally never take a bottle from, that, especially in the Middle East. I didn't expect to find drinkable wine in the Middle East, much less good wine. But that label, Cremation Monastery and Winery, just intrigued me.
And then, of course, in the book, you do talk about your experiences visiting there and everything. And I have to say, before I kind of go on to the next questions, what occurred to me were the parallels. And I don't know if you found this in your book research, but the wine world is actually smaller the more you learn, the more people you come in contact with. I mean, there are people you've talked to who've been on the show. There's that tasting that Lisa Granick did of the Georgian wines in the summer of 2015. Shortly after that, she came to New Orleans and she did that tasting for us at the Society of Wine Educators Conference. Steph and I sat in that very tasting where we tasted the pheasant's tears and all that. And I'm sitting there reading this book going, oh, we tasted the same summer he did while this book was being written. Oh, you were in the Middle East in 2008. I was in Israel in 2008. That was the first time I had Israeli wine. That is just some crazy stuff that paralleled a lot of wine journeys all kind of coming together in this book.
I think you hit on something that, without knowing it, a lot of us around the world, without knowing each other, were looking for something different. Even if we still love the classic French grapes and wines or Italian grapes and wines, I ran into people all over the world who, starting about 10 or 15 years ago, just were looking for other grapes and other wines and other stories, and it's kind of grown into a movement, I think.
I think you're right, because those stories are there. They just need to be uncovered. The grapes are there, which is why we encourage our listeners to engage in something we call the hashtag W25 challenge, where they try to drink something new, whether it's a beverage, a grape, a region, or whatever, just to try something new. So we want them to experience those things. But during your time writing this book, is there anything that you would like to relive, whether it was an experience or a conversation or something you tasted?
I would like to go back to the Republic of Georgia. I had a great visit at Alaverdi Monastery, but it was definitely one of those visits I felt didn't last long enough. And they're right at the foothills of the Caucasus Mountains. I guess the mountains start literally a couple of miles away. They look closer because they're pretty big mountains. But I really wanted to go off into some of those valleys, which are, scientists believe maybe some of the valleys, where winemaking originated 8,000 or 10,000 years ago. The rivers come down right out of the mountains, and there's a river nearby. And I so much wanted to go back into the mountains, but I just didn't have time.
How much time would you recommend somebody spend if they were to go out there?
I'd say the Republic of Georgia. I mean, you could do it it's a small country, so you could do it in 3 or 4 days, but I'd really recommend a week or even 2 weeks, because there were parts of the country that I didn't visit at all, like the Black Sea area, which is a slightly different winemaking tradition.
Well, and so you were saying that you would have liked to spend more time in the Caucasus. How about not spending more time building a vineyard? Or would you at least tell the story about how hard of work that was when you were building the stone walls of the vineyard?
Well, that was... I don't know if we want to jump ahead, but it was hard getting up there, first of all. In the book, I describe my extremely tiny part in helping build a terrace up in the Swiss Alps. But I'm not sure if I quite explained that it's like the highest part of the mountain, and this is the Alps, near probably 10 miles away from the Matterhorn or something. And even the members of the group, it's a wine really preserved called Vinesh that Jose Vuillemot, the great Swiss scientist, helped to co-found a number of years ago. That group of people got together and bought this tiny old plot of rare grapes to save it. But then there was a lot of work to, take care of the vineyard and rebuild the terraces. But gosh, it was hard even just getting up there. And that was before starting the work. And then, you look at these walls and they're so perfect and all these stones, but when you start carrying them around, you realize how slow it is. And all I did was lug them around to the, master wall builders. And actually then you have to lug around big baskets of dirt to backfill in the wall so the whole thing doesn't collapse. And I was pretty pathetic at it.
I thought those were great stories in the book, because it just shows, how important that work is and how difficult it is from your perspective. It was so cool.
And it was really a revelation looking out across the valley and seeing, there are probably hundreds of terraces just in that one little valley, and all built. I think most of them were built in the 1800s, probably some in the 1700s. But boy, awful lot of work.
Yeah. And I was reading that part of the book when I was in the Swiss Alps, actually. I was at Mont Blanc and staying in Chamonix with some friends. And I was just like, I felt like I was there with you. You know, I mean, it's kind of like Val saying, you know, we all get connected and the world becomes so small because I'm like, I'm here and I'm trying to figure out, you know, why the river looks so opaque, only to learn in your book that it's called glacial milk. And I was like, this is so weird that this wine book is explaining what is here when I'm on vacation.
That's a great term. I love that word, actually, that phrase, glacial milk.
That sounds...
I know.
That's crazy.
So cool.
Actually, I took the liberties of writing a very crazy review on your book on my website today because the part where the women went on the rampage, I have to say that was hilarious to me, the Bakke. And and of course, I started creating these crazy hashtags. Dionysus made me do it. Has anyone seen my snake? What have you? And I thought it was so funny because again, throughout this book, there are so many different topics that you cover, whether it is the chapter on how important wine and women were back in ancient Roman and Greek cultures, to foie gras, to, it was around page 25. Oh, I wonder if he knows about this Midas touch, this dogfish head. I turned the page and there's a recommendation. And it was just crazy how many topics you were able to cover in, I would say, under 300 pages. Yet it was such a quick read and it was so diverse that you could literally open the table of contents and go, oh, I think I'm going to read here. Of course, you're going to want to go back to the beginning and see how it started. But something I did notice was you seem quite the evangelist of the autochthonous grapes, or the indigenous grapes. If you are not the evangelist of the autochthonous grapes, Kevin, who would you say is?
Jose Vuillamo is the worldwide master, although we have to give Jancis Robinson credit too, because my understanding is she was the one who had long wanted to do the Wine Grapes book, the huge compendium that came out in 2012, you know, a great book that inspired me and many other people. And I think she originally approached Carol Meredith, who had been at University of California, Davis, but Carol was retiring or had retired. She said, nope, you know, try Jose Vuillamo. So it sounds to me like Jancis Robinson was aware that there was a need for this probably 15 years ago. So as usual, she's ahead of us all.
So is there going to be another one? Did you mention that the next edition, there's going to be more grapes added? Did you mention she's working on another one?
They are keeping a list of grapes to add. They hope there's going to be a second edition. They're kind of waiting, I think, for the final okay from a publisher, but they're definitely keeping notes on grapes they've found over the last few years that need to be added.
So are they working on a yeast book?
No, not that I know of, although, you know, a number of people ask me that, what my next book might be. And, you know, you could write a whole book about wine yeast, but I'm just not sure people are ready for it.
There's maybe not enough edutainment, the educational part's there, but maybe not the entertainment.
Yeah, somehow I don't think they're the same fun stories about yeast like the stories you mentioned about women and wine. I don't know of any old myths about women rampaging and, you know, ancient women needing to get away from men, which I tell that story at all my events and everybody laughs that, like, yep, even 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, women needed to get away from men occasionally.
That's right. Hashtag Wands and Weapons Wednesday. So listeners, if you don't know what that means, you got to read the book.
Oh, it's so good.
And, you know, I also mentioned, I'd say the first named winemaker in history is a woman, is Siduri, in the Epic of Gilgamesh. That tale's from about 4,000 years ago. And she was also probably a tavern keeper, so technically she probably sold both beer and wine. And I think she's technically also a goddess. She's like half goddess and half human. But as far as a winemaker, the first named winemaker, I think, would be Siduri.
And we have had one of the Siduri growers of the Siduri winery on the show. So if Bonnie and Clark and you're listening, you probably already know that. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
That is cool. That is cool. Well, so you kind of mentioned that people have been asking, what is your next project? Is it a book or is it something else? And is it related to wine?
Well, there's two things I'm working on now, and I don't want to discuss them in detail, mostly because I'm superstitious and I haven't quite decided which one to plunge ahead with, but one is related to wine and the Middle East, and one is more related to flowers and science. So one's more another science and flowers book, and another one, the possible one, is going deeper into the past history of Middle Eastern wines.
That's exciting. Now, do you work with Amy Stewart at all?
We share the same publisher, and
Okay.
she's actually gave me some great advice. About 6 months before my book came out, we talked, and she was very encouraging, but we've never actually met. I'm a big fan of her books, so they have inspired me, but then she also has helped me personally.
Yeah, we are too. We love The Drunken Botanist on this show. We've talked about it quite a
Yeah,
bit.
we've referenced it a few times.
Well, Kevin, we're now at that place in the interview where we ask our guests to share either a funny or an embarrassing wine story that may or may not have gotten you into some trouble. Is there any such story in your background that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I'd like to tell the full details of the trying to build the terraces up in the Swiss Alps. I was with this small group, I guess there were about 10 other people, Swiss people, building, and they were all just working like bees, hiked all the way up there, immediately started to work, hauling around stones, this, that, and the other. And, they were of all ages. Some of them were younger than me, but some of them were my age. And they were hardly taking a break. And they were just powering around and so super organized and Swiss and precise. and I would take little breaks. I'd sort of sit down here and there, and but finally I literally hobbled off into this little hut, the winemaker's hut, and just lay down in there. It's kind of like, oh, this is it. I'm going to die up here. They were very polite. They didn't say anything to me about being a sluggard or not pulling my own weight. They just powered through all day long, and I probably took 6 breaks in addition to literally lying down in the vineyard shed.
That's pretty funny. And you would just disappear, go hide out in the shed, and nobody ever came and found you? And
no, they were too busy working. They didn't have time to, get the laggard American to do his share.
They didn't even have time to harass you, it sounds like.
No.
That's great. So if people want to find your book or connect with you online, where should they go?
My website's pretty easy, www.kevinbegos.com or at kbegos on Twitter.
Perfect.
I think we found you right before this thing was released, and I was like, oh, that looks so cool. So thank you for connecting with us and for allowing us to just take part in the early stages of this book getting out there. We're definitely going to watch and see what you do next, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you some more or maybe meet you one of these days.
That would be great. Thank you. This has been fun to talk, and thank you for, I'll look up what you wrote on the kind of early review, because that part of the book about women and wine I wondered whether I should do it, because I'm not an expert on early feminism or anything like that or women's history, but the stories were so great. I thought, no, I need to put this in there.
Yeah, I drew a few parallels to today's environment as well. So hashtag bye-bye Pentheus, and just the hashtag culture we have. What would Gilgamesh drink?
No problem. I'll look for it. Thank you.
Thank you,
Well,
Kevin.
thank you so much, Kevin.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
No, he was great.
So is it time for the shout outs? Because
Yes.
we have a big shout out for Kevin Begos.
Yes, and thank you to Johanna J. Ramos-Boyer from JRB Communications and Johanna's publicity assistant, Aaron Bolden, for helping us set up this interview. You guys did so much great work for us. We really appreciate you hooking us up with books and the interview and being so efficient. What else, Steph?
We have a Instagram post that we want to read. I think you'll know why. This is from Kristen L., and we are so grateful, Kristen. Thank you. She says, I've been listening to the Wine 25 podcast for a couple of months now, binging it from the very beginning. I learned that there's so much more to wine than what I currently consume, which is almost 100% California wine. I've been inspired by the podcast to start learning more about wines from other places. This is one of the books they mention a lot, and I'm excited to start reading. And she shared a picture of Andrea Emma Robinson's book, Great Wine Made Simple, that Val says is like the perfect beginner book. Is that not so perfect, too, that like this post from Kristen ties in so perfectly with Kevin's interview about drinking new things and learning more about wine.
It really does. And Kristen, I have to confess that Andrea Emmer was one of my very early influencers. She a TV show back in like 2003 on Fine Living Network called Simply Wine. I think it was called Simply Wine, and she was Andrea Emmer back then. She wasn't Andrea Robinson, and I actually got to meet her in November, and I have to say I did a little fangirling. So it's so cool that you found this book, and we really hope you're enjoying it, because we have our fangirl moments, that's for sure.
Oh, we do. And I think, Andrea, I think we communicated with her. She would be interested in being on the show, I think. So we should follow up.
I believe so. We would love to have her on the show if she's not too busy, because I know she's got a lot going on. But that's so cool. But thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to hopefully hearing more from you.
Yeah. And shout out to Weekly Tasting, our show sponsor, and part of the incredible offerings from WTSO, Wine Still Sold Out. One of the benefits of Weekly Tasting, I think this is awesome, is the colorful recipe cards that come with the 4 wines. They are even gluten-free recipes sometimes, and you'll also appreciate that they're simple steps and none of those weird off-the-wall ingredients. Right, Val?
I know. It's just like, yeah, do you have fenugreek in your spice rack? I would say some of us probably do. But most of us most likely don't, and chances are these recipe cards aren't going to ask you for that. But you can go to your own listener page at weeklytasting.com/W25 to sign up and get started, or you can just go to the Wine to Five webpage, click on the link in the top right-hand corner, and off you go.
And now on to our Patreon love. Go for it, Val.
Patreon love time. We're going to start with our Reserva Superiore supporter, Robin from Girls Gone Grape, and our Reserva supporter, Auntie in Georgia.
And our tenacious tasters, Jeff E. from We Like Drinking Podcast, Sebastian of Sassy Italy Tours, Jen in Maryland, David and Lisa in Illinois, and Anne-Marie in Virginia.
And our It's Not 5 O'Clock and We Don't Care listeners in South Dakota, Meg in Arizona, Clay in California, John Andrew in Iswani, Chantel's in Ontario, Canada, Mary Lou's in Pennsylvania, Kathy's in Georgia, Chris, Janet, and Diane are here in Colorado, Steve and Renee, they're in Illinois, Kathy's in Tennessee, Ashley's in North Carolina, and Shauna's in Ohio.
And I think it might be Andrew's birthday today.
What? How do you know that?
I got a notification on Skype that said it's Andrew's birthday. I don't know, but
I didn't know Skype did that. That's pretty funny.
If it is, it's July 30th when we're recording, and we wish you a happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday to our millennial moment guy, Andrew. That is awesome.
Okay, back to our Patreon love here. Tastemaker listeners, David in Scotland, Carol in Kentucky, Karen in California, Chip and Katie in Pennsylvania, Serena in New York, and Danielle. So you can go to our Patreon page for details about this, patreon.com/wine25podcast. And we have a monthly drawing that you will get entered into, and there's exclusive content for our patrons and swag just for our patrons.
And between our weekly episodes, you can find goodies on our website or find us on the social spaces at Wine25. And that's all we have for you guys this week. But until next week, cheers!
Thank you for listening to the Wine to Five podcast. Be sure to check us out at Facebook/WineTWO5 and tune in next week for more fun and useful sip tips.